How's your heart today? Some distances are hard to explain because nobody actually disappeared. The person is still alive. Their name still lights up on your phone sometimes. You still know where they live, what kind of coffee they drink, and maybe even how their laugh sounds when they're really tired. And yet something that once felt close now feels separated by a quiet kind of weather. Tonight is for those people, the ones who are still here, but no longer reachable in the way they used to be. These letters are for family, friendship, and love that did not end dramatically, only quietly enough to leave us wondering what else might have been said. If you've ever reread one final message and felt something unfinished move inside you, maybe this will feel familiar. I never told you that I read your last message 3 times before answering too casually. It was from my sister, though sister has never fully captured what you were to me. You were older by 6 years, which in childhood felt like the distance between a kid and someone who already understood the world. You tied my shoelaces too tightly, corrected my grammar too quickly, and always packed extra snacks without admitting they were for me. Your love was practical and slightly bossy, which is also how mine learned to answer you. When we were younger, we were built into each other's days without effort. The same hallway, the same kitchen, the same tired dinner table at the end of school nights. Even after you moved out, your presence stayed in the house through your old mug, your shampoo still half full in the shower, the drawer you said you'd clear out next weekend. For almost a year, you were not only a person I loved, you were part of the structure of home. As adults, we became close in the modern way people do. Not long calls, but useful texts. Did you eat? Mom sounds tired. Can you remind Dad about the appointment? Take an umbrella tomorrow. We sent each other recipes we never made, screenshots of cheap flights we never booked, and photos of things only the other person would understand. Our affection became efficient, but it still felt steady. Then life became heavier in ways that looked ordinary from the outside. Your job grew sharper around the edges. My days got longer and thinner. Mom started needing more help without admitting she needed help. Dad began repeating stories, which is the sort of thing that feels harmless until suddenly it doesn't. Neither of us said, "I'm overwhelmed," even when that was clearly the main weather system passing through both our lives. We stayed in logistics. Logistics can keep love alive for a while, but sometimes it also hides how tired everyone has become. The last real message you sent before the distance settled was simple. "Can you call Mom tonight? She sounded lonely." That was all. I saw it while standing in line for coffee, answered, "Yeah, I will." And then added a heart because the heart seemed to do emotional work faster than language. You replied with a thumbs up. From the outside, it was a normal exchange. 2 adult daughters coordinating care. Nothing dramatic, nothing broken. But I remember staring at your message afterward and feeling there was more underneath it. Not only call Mom. Also, I can't hold all of this alone. Also, please notice I'm tired too. Also, maybe, please don't let our family become a set of responsibilities we manage instead of a place we still belong. I wish I had called you instead of only Mom. I wish I had said, "How are you, really?" in a tone that made room for a real answer. I wish I had told you that I saw how often you became the strong one by default, and how expensive that role can be when nobody interrupts it. I wish I had admitted that I was overwhelmed too, because sometimes honesty is the only thing that keeps siblings from becoming coworkers in the same emotional company. Instead, I did what adults do when they are trying to remain functional. I handled the task. I called Mom. I picked up groceries the next day. I texted you that it was done. You answered, "Thank you." And I could already feel our conversations narrowing into transactions, each one useful, each one slightly lonelier than before. Months passed like that. Not silent, just thin. We still sent birthday messages. We still shared updates when something truly required it. But the old middle of us, the casual part, the unnecessary part, the human part kept disappearing. One day I noticed I no longer sent you photos of silly grocery store signs, or asked whether you thought a dress looked too serious for a wedding. I did not stop loving you. I just stopped assuming I still had easy access to you. That is what hurt. Not one final fight. Not one unforgivable thing. only the gradual realization that our last truly ordinary message had already happened, and neither of us had known it was the last of its kind. A few weeks ago, while clearing screenshots from my phone, I found that message again. "Can you call Mom tonight? She sounded lonely." This time I read it differently. I could hear the tenderness in it, the trust, the history, the quiet way siblings sometimes keep loving each other by handing over one small responsibility after another and hoping the weight stays shared. I also heard the exhaustion, and maybe the plea I was too busy to understand when it arrived. What I never said after that message is that I miss you in a strangely domestic way. I miss the feeling of having someone who already knew the family context before I began the story. I miss being able to say, "Mom did that thing again," and not need 3 paragraphs of explanation. I miss the version of sisterhood that lived inside easy access, not only duty. I never said that loving family from adulthood can become so administrative that we forget to protect the softness. And I never said that sometimes your last ordinary message becomes a mirror years later. It shows you not just what the other person needed, but what you were too rushed, too proud, or too tired to hear at the time. The truth I carry now is simple. I didn't need one more task from you. I needed one more honest conversation. And maybe you did too. Some final messages do not sound final at all. They sound like Tuesday. That is why they can haunt us so gently. The hardest unfinished things are often hidden inside ordinary sentences. The next letter is for a friend whose last message was kind, light, and completely unable to hold what I wish I had said back. "I never told you that your last joke made me cry an hour later." You were the kind of friend who made daily life feel less expensive. That is still the best way I know to put it. You lowered the emotional cost of everything. Bad commutes, bad bosses, bad coffee, bad weather, bad dates. None of it became dramatic with you. It just became survivable, because you knew how to make absurdity feel lighter without making pain feel small. We met in our early 20s, when both of us were pretending to be more organized than we were. You once described adulthood as just carrying a tote bag full of receipts and unresolved thoughts, and I laughed so hard I nearly missed my stop. That was the beginning. After that, you became part of the daily current. Voice notes from the pharmacy, photos of crooked parking jobs, messages that said only, "Please look at this sandwich and mourn with me." So much of our friendship lived in the small, ridiculous, unimportant things. Which is exactly why it mattered so much. There was no big fallout. People always expect one when they hear 2 friends are no longer close. But nothing happened that could be turned into a clean story. You moved for work. I started helping my family more on weekends. You fell in love with someone kind. I became one of those adults who needs a calendar invitation to remember joy is still part of life. We kept trying, then kept meaning to. The distance did not begin with silence. It began with rescheduling. For a while, our friendship became polite, in a way that made me uneasy. Still affectionate, still warm, but no longer automatic. We reacted to each other's big updates. We remembered birthdays. We said, we should catch up properly in voices that were sincere enough to feel almost honest. But the daily version of us had already begun to fade, and I did not know how to grieve something still alive enough to text me back. Your last message before the real drift settled was exactly the kind of thing you would send. You had seen a display in a grocery store where someone had arranged melons into a pyramid so unstable it looked existential. You sent me a blurry photo with the caption, "This is how I imagine both of us are holding it together lately." I laughed out loud in my kitchen. Then I stared at the screen, because under the joke was a question. Or maybe an opening. A small emotional doorway shaped like humor, which had always been one of our oldest languages. I could have stepped through it. I could have replied, honestly, not very well. I could have said, "I miss you." I could have admitted that I had started feeling strangely untethered in a life that looked fine on paper. I could have said, "I hate that our friendship has become something I need to schedule like a dentist appointment." Instead, I sent, "This is art," followed by 3 laughing emojis. You replied with one more joke. I replied hours later. Then the thread ended the way many adult threads do. Not with closure. Only with a gap that quietly becomes the new normal. For months, I told myself I was overthinking it. We were still friends, we still cared. Nothing terrible had happened. But grief does not always need a disaster. Sometimes all it needs is the loss of reflex. The loss of being each other's first thought for small things. A few weeks after that message, something ridiculous happened at work. The kind of story you would have answered in 10 seconds with exactly the right combination of sympathy and mockery. I took a screenshot, opened our chat, and froze. Not because I had nothing to say. Because I no longer knew if I was allowed to be that immediate. That hesitation hurt more than it should have. Or maybe exactly as much as it should have. Later that night, I scrolled back to the melon photo and read the exchange again. Suddenly it felt unbearably tender. Two tired adults trying to tell the truth through humor because truth in a straight line had started feeling too heavy, too late, too out of practice. What I never said after your last message is that you were one of the last people who knew my life before I had translated it into something presentable. I never said that your jokes mattered because they kept me from mistaking heaviness for adulthood. I never said that some friendships teach you your own emotional language, and losing daily access to that friendship can make you feel briefly less fluent in yourself. I also never said that the reason I answered lightly was not indifference. It was fear. Fear that if I finally told the truth after too many surface-level weeks, it would sound more dramatic than it really was. Fear of making the room awkward. Fear of discovering that we had already become too far away to hold the same honesty we once held easily. The final thing I should have said was this: I saw the opening inside your joke. I just didn't know if we still lived in the kind of friendship where I could walk through it barefoot. Some last messages are not missed because we ignored them. They are missed because we answered only the surface and left the deeper invitation untouched. The last letter is for the person I loved, who did not disappear, did not betray me, and still somehow became unreachable in the way that matters most. I never told you that your last message was too gentle to answer honestly. We had already ended by then, though ended is a blunt word for what happened. Our relationship did not collapse. It thinned. We became quieter with each other in all the wrong places. We still knew what groceries the other liked. We still asked about work. We still remembered appointments, passwords, the names of each other's cousins, the best route home in traffic. We still had history, affection, and practical tenderness, but emotional immediacy had begun to leave before either of us admitted it was going. When people imagine breakups, they tend to imagine impact. A discovery, a betrayal, a speech. But ours felt more like watching warmth slowly leave a room you were both still sitting in. By the time we finally named it, we sounded almost relieved by our own honesty. That was the saddest part. Not that we no longer cared. That we had cared so carefully for too long. Afterward, we did what kind people often do. We tried to make the ending neat. A few exchanged items. A conversation that was calm enough to be mistaken for easy. One or two messages in the weeks after, practical and polite, like adults proving to each other that pain had not made them unrecognizable. I thought that politeness would protect us. Then your final message came one rainy Tuesday evening. I hope work is being a little kinder this week. That was it. No agenda, no manipulation, no hidden hook to pull me back in. Just one small sentence, so ordinary and decent that I nearly broke over it. Because it was exactly the sort of message that would once have felt natural between us. And now it arrived carrying all the tenderness of a life that had become inaccessible. I stared at it for a long time. What I wanted to say was not simple. I wanted to say, work is fine. It's the rest of the day that feels strange. I wanted to say, I still miss reaching for you without thinking. I wanted to say, thank you for being gentle, but your gentleness is making this harder, not easier. I wanted to say, I don't know how to be cared for by you in a smaller way than before without my whole body remembering the original size of it. Instead, I answered, thanks. Hope your week's okay too. Perfectly civilized, perfectly inadequate. You replied with a short line and a simple sign-off. That was the end of the thread. There has been no dramatic silence since, only the kind that grows naturally when two people understand that further contact would keep scratching a wound that is trying to close cleanly. But I still think about that message sometimes. Not because I want the relationship back exactly as it was. I don't think that's true anymore. I think what I wanted, and maybe still want in a quieter way, was the right to respond honestly without reopening everything. But adulthood does not always offer such clean options. Sometimes honesty and restraint are both loving, and the difficulty is that they point in opposite directions. What I never told you is that your last message showed me something important. Love can remain kind even when it can't remain close. That is a hard thing to learn because it gives the heart less to fight. There was no villain to resist, no cruelty to detach from, no clean anger to build a new identity around. There was only tenderness, changed into something smaller and more careful than before. For a long time, I thought that meant I should be grateful enough not to grieve. Now I know better. Gentle endings are still endings. Polite distance still takes something with it. A last message can still echo, even when every word in it was kind. I also never said that your question about work landed because it remembered the version of me you used to live beside. It noticed the exact corner of my life that had been under pressure lately. That hurt, in the purest sense, because it meant some part of you still knew me. Not enough to remain, but enough to make the distance feel textured, not abstract. The truth I carry now is this. The saddest part was never that you stopped caring. It was that care had to become so careful. And maybe that is one of the crueler things about mature endings. Love does not always vanish before contact does. Sometimes it survives just long enough to speak one last gently worded sentence that neither person can fully answer anymore. If someone came to mind tonight, maybe it's because the last message is rarely only about the message itself. It's about timing, language, pride, and all the truths that arrived a little too slowly for the moment that could have held them. Some people are still alive in our contacts, our memories, our weather, our habits, and our half-formed replies. It only means the bond was real enough to leave echoes. If these letters kept you company tonight, stay gentle with yourself. Some unfinished feelings are not asking to be solved. They are only asking to be named with care.